Good evening to all the participants that have logged in today. We will be starting in a few moments, so I request you to wait for the team to start. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Town Hall series organized by the Center for Public Policy Research, CPPR. CPPR is an independent public policy think tank based out of Kochi in the Indian state of Kerala. Our engagement in public policy that began in 2004 has initiated open dialogue, policy changes, and institutional transformation in the areas of international relations and security, livelihood, education, urban reform, health, governance, and law. To know more about what we do, please visit our website, www.cpprin, and follow our social media accounts. The CPPR Town Hall series is a live virtual discussion forum for leading minds across the world to converse and critique the state of play in public policy. Today, we have gathered here for the 8th episode of this Town Hall series. I am Purvaja Modak, Research Fellow for International Relations Geoeconomics at CPPR, the Center for Public Policy Research. The speaker for today is Dr. R.P. Pradhan. Dr. Pradhan is an associate professor at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, BITS Pilani, the KK Birla Goa campus. He is a PhD in international relations and largely works on issues of political economy. His current teaching and research focus involves international relations, migration and labor markets, international trade and development, development economics, maritime studies, and the blue economy. Dr. Pradhan has received the Rogelio Sinan Appreciation Award from the Embassy of Panama in 1997 and has served as an expert member for the Commonwealth Fellowship for Economics from 2006 to 2010. He was a trustee, a governing board member at the International Center Goa for 4 years, 2006 to 2010, and has completed 2 ICSSR major projects. Apart from his publications and editorial responsibilities, Professor Pradhan has delivered several invited lectures abroad at several European universities and Southeast Asian universities. He is a distinguished fellow for political economy at CPPR. The session will be moderated by Dr. Vijay Sakhoja. Dr. Sakhoja is the former director of the National Maritime Foundation, New Delhi. A former Indian naval officer, Dr. Sakhoja has received his MPhil and PhD degrees from the Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. He has published over 40 books, edited volumes and monographs, and specializes in issues of national security and public policy, particularly in the context of ocean affairs, geopolitics, climate change, the Arctic, blue economy, and the fourth industrial revolution technologies. He has been on research faculties of institutions like RSIS, ICWA, ORF, and IDSA, and is currently associated with the Cambodia Institute for Cooperation and Peace, the Peninsula Foundation, India Strategic, and the Kalinga Foundation. He is a member of the International Editorial Board of the Journal for Indian Ocean Region, Taylor and Francis, and the Journal for Greater Mekong Studies. He regularly teaches and lectures at defense and civil universities and colleges in India and overseas. He is an honorary distinguished fellow at CPPR. A warm welcome to you both. Dr. Pradhan and Dr. Sakhoja will be discussing the Sagar, Sagarmala, and the Seaports of India, a maritime big push approach in the Indo-Pacific. Before I hand over to the moderator, Dr. Sakhoja, a quick note to the participants here. You may type in your questions to our speaker in the chat box below. Those joining from YouTube Live can comment there, and our team will direct the questions to the speakers. You can follow our live tweets and share your thoughts using the hashtag CPPR Town Hall. Oh, thank you, and over to you, Dr. Sakhoja.
Thank you, Purvaja, and thank you, CPPR, for this opportunity to moderate this session for a very fascinating subject called Sagar, Sagarmala, and ports. As a matter of fact, had he chosen another S, we could have called it a 3S. I don't know whether we can find another, another antonym for that matter for ports. But be that as it may, I think it's a fascinating subject. And I think what he's trying to bring in for us is in terms of a vision. That's the national vision, Prime Minister Modi's vision of security and growth for all. That's what Sagar is all about. And then there is also the policy part of it. In the sense, Sagarmala, which was absolutely moribund for a long, long time, but then suddenly it's been resurrected. And for the last several years now, I think is making some significant progress. And of course, ports. And ports actually, and if one goes back into the basics of, in terms of India's economy, and particularly in the context of our overseas trade, I think ports play, they are the nodes, they are the ones from where we conduct our business, and maritime economy to that extent is very, very important. And within this maritime economy, what used to be normally be taken as a subject for debate and discussion, I think we got a new overarching concept called blue economy. And in that context, Sagarmala, and the seaports, I think they fit in so very, very well. So what we are looking at is, and we are at a time when there is a tendency to now, and we just come out of COP26. We've already had a Clyde Declaration too. And all these events which have happened in terms of climate, the relevance and reference of ports within the context, within the prism of climate have become very, very important. Ports, yes, they're a destination. They're a port of departure, port of arrival, from which cargo comes in. A variety of cargo is there. And if one goes by the UNCTAD report, we're going to see anything about 3.2% growth, notwithstanding the pandemic, for another couple of years. So trade is going to grow, and ports, for that matter, looking into the economy of various countries across the globe, I think we are going to find them a very, very important destination. And within this context, I think Professor Pradhan is going to share with us his perspective on this particular issue. I'm hoping that he will bring in keywords which resonate as of now. As a matter of fact, having come out of COP26, resilient infrastructure, sustainability, climate and energy. I think these are the ones which have to be now prefixed. Of course, Sagar was talked about in 2018. I guess that was the time that we started about talking about it, 17 and 18. And then we were talking about Sagarmala again, 14. We started again, resurrected it. And seaports, in any case, have been with us. And there are several, I think if one looks at the way the Ministry of Shipping Transport has gone about doing this business, I think ports have become very, very important. Without any further ado, I'm going to request Professor Pradhan to make his remarks. Professor, you have about 20-25 minutes, and thereafter, I think we'll conduct the business led by question and answers. And I'll reserve my comments as of now. All right, we'll have some ideas to share with you, which probably you might find them useful when you're finalizing your paper. Over to you, Professor Pradhan. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to share my screen, so just give me a few seconds, please. Purvaja, is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, it is. If you could move to PowerPoint mode,
yeah.
yes.
Is it? Yeah. Very good afternoon, and I'm indeed privileged to be invited to CPPR for this particular lecture. Few days ago, I had published a small article in a newspaper in a similar line called Sagar, Sagarmala and the Seaports of India. It's in that direction the article was published. It was published in Fast Post. Also, we have submitted a full-scope research paper on the whole gamut of Sagar, Sagarmala, and the seaports. So this is an extension of the same idea that I have been working on for quite some time. And that's where the benefit I have is the presence of Dr. Sakhoja, a very old friend. And then Dr. Sakhoja, if I understand him correctly, his slogan has been that maritime matters. Everything maritime, coming from the Navy, and then delving into maritime academics in a big, big way. I think I have learned many things from him, and privileged that he is moderating the session, so I have double benefit. In addition to that, CPPR team has been an intellectual platform for many of us, to connect to distinguished people in many segments and sectors and all that. And that's where, thank you very much, Dr. Dhanraj, Mr. Paul, Purvaja, the entire CPPR team for this platform to speak our ideas. Also equally privileged that our friend from Poland, Ambassador Thomas Lucas, also has joined us from Poland. And I know him as a great diplomat who understands South Asia and Southeast Asia to a great extent. And that's why he's joining us is an additional privilege. Also added to that, I teach a course called Maritime Studies and Blue Economy. I'm teaching at BITS Pilani Kekebirla Goa campus, which is essentially a science and technology and engineering institute. So all my students, needless to say, they're all engineers in the making. And I have the benefit of working with most of our students. And what it has led me to is that we have created a very fascinating lab, data lab. We are mapping all the seaports of the world, 17,219 seaports spread all over the world. We are mapping them in terms of the nature, structure, and the scope of the port itself. Also, the kind of vessels that move to all these ports. So all the vessel mapping and all of that, and happy to share that very fascinating results we are getting out of that lab. Several millions of data get gathered. So that's why my collaborators have been mathematicians and big data people and engineers. And that's where I think I have a reasonable team of students. Some of them have joined here. Some of them are part of the class also. They are also here. Welcome, all of you. And I take the interaction forward. First of all, when we talk of Sagar, Sagarmala, and Seaports of India, I mean, the whole topic has 5 components. Sagar, Dr. Sakhoja clarified that Sagar, of late it stands for security and growth for all, a typical, Modivian vision that he spoke while he was addressing the Mauritius National Assembly, that suddenly he came up with this Sagar. Sagar, all of us, we are familiar as a Hindi word as ocean. But then Sagar, he expanded to tell that it is a great ocean, not small ocean, it's a great ocean. It is the possibility of security and growth for all is also part of the whole Sagar vision. Friends, all of us who are familiar that Indo-Pacific has been the most conflicting zone today, most focused zone today, most conflicting zone today. China rise, the Americans wanting to contain China, the Japanese are restless, Southeast Asia is also vulnerable, India is playing between. It's a whole lot of things that are happening. And within that, we have small islands, Maldives to Papua New Guinea to Fiji to, you name it. And that's why, along with the rise of China, the maritime scholars are also talking about that there have been the island chains also are proliferating. Earlier, we talked about first, second, and third island chain. These days, we are talking about fourth and fifth island chain, which is from Gwadar Port to Diego Garcia, and from Oman Sokrata coast down to South Africa, fourth and fifth island chain, and lots of strategic and very critical developments are happening all around that. China has invested heavily everywhere. The Americans are wanting to contain. The Japanese are also talking about diamond security, free and independent Pacific, open FOIP. The Australians are also concerned. Small island chains are also concerned. But within that, if we look at it, the small island chains are playing a great role. That we are more concerned these days that if something happens in Maldives, we first go to Maldives to respond because we are afraid that if we delay, the Chinese might land and help them. And the Maldivian foreign policy orientation might be China-centric. So is the case in almost all the island chains there. And that's where India wants to capture. We cannot match the Chinese investments that they have spread all over. So what we are trying to offer to the maritime community, the littorals, or the global community as a whole, is that let us look at the whole framework of Sagar. It's not security alone, it's also a growth phenomena also. Can we cooperate? Can we create growth for all and then create security paradigm for all of us, starting from Maldives to big powers, to small powers, to middle powers. And that's where Sagar stands. And it's a critical foreign policy objective, and that is added with Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative of late. People are working on that. Lots of things are happening. The second part of the discussion is Sagarmala project. Of course, 2003 onwards, Vajpayee government talked about Sagarmala, but I think Sagarmala 2015 to 2035 is making big rounds. What it promises is that modernization of the seaports of India. And particularly if you see the national land highways, north-south corridor to Golden Quadrilateral, all of that are being linked to the seaports of India through expressways, freight corridors, and a lot of structural, internal structural developments are happening so that we can move our goods and services to the seaports. And Sagarmala proposes to modernize the seaports of India, and so that they can be transported to the international market and linkage. The next is seaports. Seaports, India has quite a few of them. Data of Government of India are not adequately clear. I have some data, we'll come to that. Seaports, India needed to modernize them very urgently. Next is your big push approach. Big push approach is a typical development economics approach developed in way back in 1940s and 50s. Particularly it was pertaining to the Eastern European countries, that how the Eastern European countries can become developed when Western Europe is developed, how Eastern Europe also can be equally developed. It is in that context, big push approach was developed as a mathematical model by Roden. And if you look at the special economic zones or industrial estates or such kind of initiatives, they're also a similar kind of idea. What primarily it talks about is that an aircraft, when it starts from the runway, it starts rolling and then picks up speed. And after a certain distance of big speed, then only it can be airborne. So the aircraft, in order to be airborne, it needs to pick up a momentum of a threshold speed so that it can be airborne. That is what is exactly happening in India, in the India's infrastructure profile, and more so in the maritime sector of India. Big developments are happening, big changes are happening, and finally all of them are happening within the Indo-Pacific space, where India is so well centrally located that we have no choice but to participate, and participate economically, participate politically, foreign policy wise, and in a great statesman way. India has to participate, and that's where my whole narrative is all about. Friends, this is the seaports of India, you can see, and I have identified few places. In the eastern coast, we have Mangla Port, that's in Bangladesh, and then you have Gwadar Port, that's in Pakistan, and then you have Karachi Port, and then Chabahar Port. I have two prominent stories to tell, which will capture both Sagarmala and the seaport stories of India. Now, 28th of October 2017, there's a big development that happened. First time, Government of India, India is developing Chabahar Port in Iran, and many of us were concerned that Iran being in such a volatile scenario, our interest in Chabahar Port, Iran, Afghanistan, all of that are a victim of geopolitical volatility. 2017, it was comparatively calmer, and then that's the time India's Chabahar Port development, the first phase of development got completed. So as a mark of celebration, what Government of India did was that they sent a shipment from Kandla Port in Gujarat, west coast of India, to Chabahar Port. And the port, the vessel was carrying 130 tons of wheat. It's called as a goodwill wheat, to be delivered to the Afghanis in Afghanistan via Chabahar Port. The day the vessel moved to Chabahar Port, Pakistan television was indeed in desperate discussion as to what's happening. Chabahar is just next door. to Karachi port, Gwadar port. It is just 72 kilometers from Gwadar port. That's 28th of October 2017. And next day, Government of India again started another in the eastern coast of India. From the Chennai port, we started a shipment to Mangla port in Bangladesh. And the vessel was carrying 185 Leyland truck chassis. Earlier, chassis used to go to Bangladesh, but they would travel by road. First time, they started the maritime transportation, and it took only 5 days. But when the chassis would travel in the road, it was taking 20 to 25 days. Then you have the traffic, you have the diesel, you have the drivers needed to take them and all of that. All of that could be circumvented, and the whole transshipment could be sent in just 5 days without diesel, drivers, and many such things. This is a milestone development, and that's where the story begins. Now, I was following Pakistan television and the news media and all that. All of us in South Asia, we do so in a religious way. And this is a very interesting development. I told you that I am running a lab where we are monitoring the vessel movement to all the seaports of the world in real-time basis. So any vessel that comes to Haldia port or Kandla port or the ports in Poland or anywhere, I have a data of that. And what kind of a vessel it is, also we have a data. So after I was following Pakistan television media, they said after the Chabahar port became operational and the wheat shipment happened, Pakistan analysts were perplexed. They said that Karachi port is doomed now. Once the Chabahar port is functional, Karachi port would lose 50% of its business. And they referred that some of the Khyber Pakhtun region wheat mills and all that is already closed because of Chabahar port. That's the implication. Why they were analyzing that way? That Pakistan has Pakistan wheat quality is one of the finest in the world, and Pakistan has a monopoly wheat export to the world. And Karachi port is the gateway through which they would export it to the rest of the world. Now, suddenly Chabahar becoming operational and the Indian diplomacy wanting to send goodwill wheat export to Afghanistan via Chabahar port, they said that Karachi port's business will be definitely hampered in a great way. This is the exact vessel traffic movement of Karachi port in the last 4 years till July 2021, and it's beginning from 17th of October 2017. That means few months prior to Chabahar port became operational and till recently. And what is our finding is that 23% of cargo vessel traffic to Karachi port has been lost. Chabahar port could be one of the reason, and what went wrong with Karachi port as a result of Chabahar is that they would have a monopoly wheat shipment, so they were doing it. But in the process, what was happening, Pakistan security scenario, internal security scenario, law and order scenario not being very great, the lorries carrying wheat would get stranded on the way, 10 days, 15 days, and so on. Now, India is providing an alternative wheat supply to the international market through the Chabahar port, and that's what kills Karachi port's business monopoly. That's a great story for India. Then I have another story of the Indian seaports, the cumulative story. And this is, I'm trying to compare all the seaports of India with that of Singapore. And none of the Indians would ever like to have this kind of it's not a fascinating story for India. The simple finding, it's a 4 years data analysis, vessel by vessel, port by port. And so it's authentic. And the data are not available elsewhere. It is a difficult process through which we are gathering them. Now, Singapore port, cumulatively, if I can say, they roughly handle 3,000 vessels every day. Singapore has only one seaport, several, I think 5 terminals and all that. And they handle roughly around 3,000 vessels every day. All the functional seaports of India put together, we would not like to know that they handle all the functional ports of India put together. They roughly handle, around 600 to 700 vessels every day. That means while in Chabahar, at the international space, we have done well, great diplomacy, but in the internal, seaports functionality or productivity, vessel handling, carrying capacity, we seem to be somewhere in a very, very, performing state, and that's where I think we need to revise. That's where Sagarmala and Seaports of India, they talk about the what do we mean by the seaports when we talk of. Now, if you want to know any country's economic health, look at the vessel traffic of their to their seaports, both the import and exports, and nearly 90 to 92% of the supplies, imports and exports are through the seaports. So if you monitor or analyze the seaports data, vessel traffic data, you get the index of economic health of a given country. And that's why seaports, I don't see them as only gateways. I see them as serious, strategic, economic, maritime, raw material that holds prospect for growth. Friends, this is a comparative picture of how the seaports of the world, comparatively, if we look at it, I have 4 countries: India, USA, China, and Japan. Now, Japan, if you look at it, I think there's so many seaports that the map of Japan is lost. And in that, you see several of the pink color icons. They're all called as the very, very large seaports. India doesn't have a single very large seaport. Our seaports are small or very small category. Medium are also very few. China has 156 seaports and 1 or 2 very large seaports. On the other side of it, if you see USA, now they have 15 very, very large seaports. And so one can connect the number of seaports and the nature, scope, and the structure of seaports define the economic efficiency of a given country. And any country that doesn't take care of the seaports, I think the economic efficiency of that country also gets hindered. And that's why we have to, this is a comparative narrative of that. Now, data-wise, Government of India data, I think young friends, those who would like to know how many ports India has, you will get several data. Some data, they say 205, 185, 165, 105, n number of data. So what we did is that we wanted to find out how many seaports India does really have. And that's where we find that there are 71 seaports, functional seaports, where vessels arrive. Our seaports are where vessels arrive, 71. And that 71, 43 of them are in the west coast and 28 of them are east coast of India. And within that, if you have anchorage and you have the seaport. So if you take out the anchorage and all that, then it boils down to 55 functional seaports of India. I think somewhere data-wise, I think Government of India, we need to really come out with the correct data so that our research also can be more efficient and more beneficial. Now, Sagarmala, friends, it's a wonderful scheme. I think I would say that what we do in the planning process for the country, economic planning process for the country, that kind of a similar kind of exercise needs to happen in the maritime space. What Sagarmala offers at the minimal is that 2015 to 2035, it will generate 10 million jobs. And 10 million jobs is a wonderful, wonderful development to happen, where world over jobs are simply vanishing. More than $87 billion cost. And they're trying to modernize the seaports. They're trying to build coastal industrialization process and rail, road, freight connectivity, and coastal economic zones, special economic zones, and so on. And skill development also, all of them, they're doing it. It's a good development, good part of Sagarmala world over now is actually happening also. It has been already known to be happening. But very interestingly, we had a parliamentary committee meeting that examined the Sagarmala development, not very long ago. That was last 2021 August. This is what is the finding, that Sagarmala project is falling far behind its delivery schedule. 802 projects have been sanctioned. Out of them, only 172 projects completed so far. Remaining 632 projects, now they are far below project target. 98 road connectivity projects to ports, only 13 are completed. Out of 91 rail connectivity projects, only 28 projects are completed. That means the parliamentary committee means, that means we have a very, very correct scenario that Sagarmala idea-wise, it is wonderful. If at all it materializes, we will definitely create economic history from the maritime sector of India. But unfortunately, I think the state of delivery of our work is falling far behind. And that's where, that's an internal story. We have done well in Iran. We are trying to do good in Indo-Pacific also, trying to be. And the whole Indo-Pacific, if we look at it, militancy is the word that everybody trying to display their musclemanship. China, the Americans, Japanese, Australians, and all that, lots of things are happening. And we have lots of naval exercises, Malabar, Milan, Sea Guardian, and then you name it, it is there. It's a wonderfully complex scenario of security conflict. And within that, if you look at it, Djibouti, countries like Djibouti, they say that we are a poor country. If you want to build a military facility in our country, we will give you in real estate terms. So you have in Djibouti, we have the American base, naval base. You have the French base. The British are operating from the American base. You have a Japanese Air Force base there. You have the Chinese first naval overseas bases there. Everybody is trying to go to Djibouti so that they can have a strategic presence there. So small island nations are beginning to bargain well between the big powers, and that's why we have the best option, best orientation of, instead of meeting the security in a security to eyeball contact, we are talking about Sagar, security and growth for all. Now, if at all we try to do that, what's the limitation? I will complete in another 5 minutes. Purvaja, I suppose I have time.
Yes, sir. You can wind up your presentation in the next few minutes. Thank you.
Now, I work from the political economy perspective to look at the sea and the resources that we can get, or the economic opportunities that we can create from that point of view. So I wanted to map actually the entire Indo-Pacific. If at all Far East is not included in this particular graph, I wanted to understand myself as to what is the stretch of maritime space it is, how many countries are there, how many people are there, what is the GDP, and how many seaports are there. We just looked at the basic infrastructure that is available. This is what it is, 44 countries in the Indo-Pacific. Now, Far East is not included, manually done, so few countries are missed out. 44 countries spread in 3 continents. Coastline-wise, all of them together, they represent now 197,000 kilometers of coastline, and there are a total of 721 seaports. And if you see the distribution of seaports in the entire Indo-Pacific region, and that's why particularly for the young friends, those who are not familiar with the maritime space, we call it as IORA, Indian Ocean Ream Association, and it's a great platform by connecting all of them. You have the IORA core members and you have the dialogue partners also. So you have 721 seaports in this region, and out of that, if you see, Southeast Asia represents 56% of the seaports, and Southeast Asia is more developed compared to the rest. Then you have Oceania, Australia and New Zealand, just 2 countries, they represent 21% of the seaports. Then Africa, Gulf countries and South Asia, they represent minimal, and South Asia is the most minimal. It's a, population is over 4 billion in this region, more than 60 trillion of economy. And so the seaports, if you, infrastructure wise, if you map it, it seems to be far too inadequate. And that's why India, sitting on a 7,500 kilometer of coastline, we have a great role and responsibility to start corrections at our domestic space first. What do we do? This is, I look at the coast, seaports of India with that of West Asia. This is a typical idea that I have, I had submitted to WTO. WTO has a program called Trade for Peace. And I'm happy to share that my first round concept note has been approved. And we are slated for the next round of virtual presentation that's on 2nd of February. So we will be interacting with the team in Geneva, if at all that makes some sense. What is the idea? That we have so many seaports here, but then we have exports and imports, but we do not have port-to-port stakeholdership among ourselves. And how can that stakeholdership be created? Is that there's an economic format called customs union. So if at all you have Arabian Sea Customs Union, that's a typical economic model through which, if at all the seaport countries of this region, they come together, may not be all, but some of them, then what they do is that they choose products and then tariff discount is available to them as members between the shipment of vessels among their countries. So you cut down the cost of your export and import, and accordingly you stand to benefit. Non-members will have to pay more. So if at all we do that, this is not yet explored yet. If we do that, what happens is that the stakeholder countries where seaports are integrated as customs union, they will take care of their own, because of their own economic interest, they will take care of their own seaports and integrate with the other seaports of India or the rest of the community or countries, and stakeholdership leads to what we call a functional, neo-functionalism approach in IR, we call it, where material integration can lead to stakeholdership, and stakeholdership leads to cumulative joint responsibility, where peace is likely to prevail. That's one part of it. West Asia, we have not looked at it in this format as yet. We also have a similar kind of approach with South Africa. South Africa, we have been negotiating for the past 2 decades that we should have a customs union in South Africa, and it is yet to happen. That also can happen, African maritime linkage. And if at all we have a similar kind of a linkage, then on the way to South Africa, we have several coastal islands, and we also touch them. That also creates an economic interaction model, which is beneficial. Third, even Bay of Bengal, if we look at it, BIMSTEC, we know it. BIMSTEC, and we would be happy also a similar kind of a maritime trade circuit can be created. Possibly these are all some of the ideas that we are working on this these days. And additionally, lots of things are happening. But what is most needed for India is that we have to be efficient internally. Like Chabahar Port, we did what was needed. We need to do for our seaports. We have to be efficient. There's no choice. Second is that India maritime research is very, very underdeveloped. We do not have maritime universities. 6 of them are there, but they're all dockyards. They're not research-based universities. We need maritime research universities. Maritime history, maritime politics, geography, all of them economics, all of them have to be understood very well. Third, and the final suggestion I have in my mind, it's running, is that now the bureaucrats of India, they're not greatly beneficial. They're all civil servants, and someday they become the chairman of a seaport. They don't really mean to identify themselves with the maritime space. We need, I think time has come. The stakes are so heavy that we need a India maritime service cadre. We need a thorough professional cadre to take care of the maritime sector possibilities and all that. In addition to that, the international level, I would suggest that India must look at developing what I can call it as Indian Ocean Development Bank. We want to invest in Mali, Maldives, and many other places. We don't have the capital. Where do you get it? And we don't have a bank like China has AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Bank. India is in the rising format. It's in a great rise now. And we speak well, we speak peace, we speak goodwill, but we do not have the capital of investment capital we do not have. And we have security challenges all around us. And that's why unless we create a format of integrating with our littorals around the Indian Ocean through capital-centric models, it will not be easy to hold them together. Chinese or the many other incentives they will get. So that's why we need a bank. It's time that India thinks about it. It's time that India thinks of a maritime cadre, civil servants and research initiatives. I think that's where I think, thank you very much. I run a forum called Goa Maritime Dialogue. And I think some of the pictures you can see, Dr. Sakhoja is also there in one of the pictures. And we have some of the lectures are already uploaded in the YouTube. You can visit the YouTube also. Thank you very much. Purvaja, I'm done.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Pradhan, for this very interesting lecture. I think everybody in the audience, I'm sure, has a lot of questions. So I'd request everybody to post your questions in the chat box, and we will direct them to Dr. Pradhan, Dr. Sakhoja as well. While I give everybody a few minutes to put in your questions, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of two retired naval officers on this forum today. We have Vice Admiral Muralidharan and Vice Admiral Ashok Kumar with us. Sirs, if you would like to make a comment on Dr. Pradhan's presentation, or maybe ask him a question, we'd request you to pose your question to him right now, if you would like to. Vice Admiral Muralidharan, I can see you there. Would you like to pose a question?
So your microphone is...
Yeah. No, thank you. I think Dr. Pradhan has covered it all very well. And we'll wait for the questions from the other audience before we take on it. Thank you.
All right, sir. And what about Vice Admiral Ashok Kumar? Would you like to come in, sir, at this point?
No, thank you very much. Interesting presentation. I know the kind of work that Dr. Pradhan is already doing. I've been a part of the Goa Maritime Dialogue as well. It's an honor to be here. Thank you. We'll look at what the questions are coming up thereafter. Thank you.
All right, sir. So jumping right into the questions, the first question is from Mr. Joshua Thomas, who is a fellow with CPPR on international relations. So his question is that with the massive push of BRI from the Chinese, where does our Sagar stand? Dr. Pradhan, would you like to take that?
Yeah, with the massive, sorry, I couldn't get the
with the massive push of BRI from the Chinese, where does our Sagar stand?
Well, I think I clarified that in terms of ideas, we stand everywhere, but in terms of delivery, we need to improve in a great way. But I wouldn't like to match the Chinese with port by port or breeze by breeze or aircraft by aircraft. Rather, we have to put our acts together and look at the long distance objective. I see this way, that the Americans are trying to contain China. China wants to rise in a big way. And the international space, the rise of Asia itself is a big puzzle. First time, non-European, non-North American, non-white country is rising to the international space and demanding acknowledgement and respect. That itself is a big challenge at the international space. Second thing is that China is also rising in a very, declaring that it is rising. Where does India stand? And that's where I'm reminded of a prophetic quote by Mackinder. Haffords and Mackinder used to be the director of London School of Economics. So he comes from the academic background. And at 1943, he wrote the last article of his life on the request of foreign policy. There's a journal. And the man was 83 years old that time. And that's where he's saying, 1943, mind you, and he's saying that the monsoon lands of India and China, they will rise to prominence. And with their civilizational value order and 1,000 million people, they will balance the world, and the remaining 1,000 people living between Missouri and Mississippi, both USA River and Russian River, the remaining 1,000 million people living between these rivers, now India and China will balance them, and the world will be happier and so on. Now, when we look at the rise of China, it's a violent rise. It's a very, very predatory rise. But the rise of India is a peaceful rise. We're rising, we are talking good to everybody, cooperative, not been predatory. So our rise, we should not try to match with the Chinese kind of investments. We do not have the capital also. Rather, we have to have greater strategy how to be part of the global system in a better way than matching the Chinese the way they are trying to do it. Thank you.
Can I join the discussion, please? This is PV Rao from Hyderabad, organizer. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Professor Rao, welcome.
Thank you, Professor Pradhan. I really learned quite a few facts and figures from you, and you tried to contextualize Sagarmala in a Indian Ocean, Indo-Pacific, as well as a global perspective. Also, thank you very much for the presentation, sir. But I too had undertaken in my own way individual research. I'm still working on that one, and I had undertaken some empirical survey also, going to ports and talking to some shipping people, etc. involved.
Right.
While I would agree that Sagarmala is definitely a very ambitious maritime development program undertaken by independent India, quite a few but very interesting rather pieces of information I learned from the respondents whom I had interviewed, which I would like to share with you and the participants over here. Number one is that Sagarmala had proposed too many major and small ports around our peninsular coast.
Yes.
And the point is whether how far they're really going to be implementable, whether feasible or not. People who are very much in this project development and also policy level, they have expressed their skepticism with me. Like I will tell you, one very senior officer in the Ministry of Shipping told me, what is the need to have Ennore and Chennore ports side by side, hardly with the 30 or 40 kilometers distance? How could you really expect both of them unless you're going to put them into loggerheads with each other? That's one I'm sharing with you, an observation.
Sure.
A second observation is very interesting, that actually the way the Chinese are developing and developing at breakneck speed, the completed Hambantota port, and they are also now they have been given the development of the Colombo port. And much of the international vessel traffic is running through them and might increase more and more. Even Indian vessels, which are either going to Singapore or Dubai or etc. to download and upload the traffic, now they would be using Hambantota and Colombo also. If that is the case, is it really necessary for under the Sagarmala to identify the development of certain major ports very close to the real Kanyakumari area, which are not very far from what I mean to say, the Colombo port? And sorry, one last one, organizer, if you allow me to say. One other skepticism that is expressed is, overall taking, how could you expect either major or state level minor ports to develop when too much of corporatization of the port and shipping development is taking place? For example, in the last 5 years, the Adani had taken over, to the best of my knowledge, at least 3 ports: Krishnapatnam, Vijayam, and I forget, sorry to say, maybe 3 or 4 more ports. We see here the public sector proposed major and minor ports on the one hand, and highly corporatized, monopolizing groups, corporate sectors, which I mentioned to you on the other hand. How could, in the given context, we could see really a good future for the execution of the identified, right, about 400 projects around the peninsular coast? Thank you, sir. This is only by way of sharing my own observations with you. It's not that you have to necessarily list them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I can respond.
So,
Yes, sir, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. I'm also equally monitoring port by port, and so I'm familiar with the issues and the concerns, including environmental issues. Lots of things are there. And
yeah.
I'm sitting here in Goa, and Goa, Adani Port, and the coal and all that. It's a political issue also. In addition to that, Sagarmala also proposes to nationalize the maritime, nationalize the rivers, Mandovi River and here and all that. That also has become a concern. Now, this is a typical concern of development. Now, either some part of it we have to sacrifice and create economic development, or we remain traditional and remain economically less developed. This is one part of it. Second part of it is that most of the developing countries, they suffer from excessive governmental interference to create profitability to certain sectors and all that. It's not a cooperative development model at all. So there is corruption, there is compromise also on environment and number of things. But choice for India in a large country like this, young people, jobs have to be created. Economic development has to happen. Now, where to bring all that possibility? Maritime sector seems to be the only possibility. And that is where what I look at it is that the sustainability slogan, SDG 14 that people are talking about, within that parameter, Government of India should be ideally pressurized to be transparent in negotiating the development of some of these issues. Next is that I'm imagining that ports are these days, actually ports means we always looked at the sea, but these days Thor Desert also has a port. Now we call it dry port, inland port, floating port, and the notion of port itself is changing in a big way. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think you travel in an aircraft and it announces that we are part of the Star Alliance. So you will have pleasure craft series of ports or port specializations. Some ports are handling only coal, some are handling only passengers. I think we are heading towards a specialization of the ports. And they will announce to the world that we are specialists in that. Come and travel with us. Have your cruise liners on this line, and so on. That's where possibly we are moving towards that. I don't have all the answers for your question, sir. I'm also part of the concern.
Thank you, Dr. Pradhan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Ambassador Tomasz Lukaszuk. He is the former ambassador of the Republic of Poland to India. His question to you, Dr. Pradhan, is how do you see the role of the EU as a participant and facilitator of Sagar?
Ambassador, thank you very much. I'm in fact working on clusterization of regions. So I'm trying to understand. I don't have the right answer for your region, but I've been working to look at the European Union seaports. How do they behave? The cargoes, the passengers, the cruise liners and all that. The very interesting finding we got of late is that when we compare the American seaports, their pleasure crafts, their passenger vessels, economies are far larger than any other countries. Total economy, vessel economy altogether. Whereas in India, we do not have passenger vessels at all. And in the Bay of Bengal, if I wonder, there's a cruise liner traveling from, let's say, from Kolkata to Myanmar, I'm sure there will be plenty of passengers for that. There is business possibility, but we have not thought of that. So I'm in the process of understanding, and then certainly maybe a little time later, once I have a good understanding of the European ports, how are they functioning, then possibly I can respond to your question, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir, for your response. The next question is from Dr. Lawrence Prabhakar Williams, who's an advisor with CPPR. And his question is that from the perspective of a performance assessment, the government of India has been talking and putting out statistics while the real concrete steps and growth has not been evident. The Chabahar port, as we all know, is already lost to China. So how does India strategize and work out its goals? Is it all just talk and nothing concrete has actually emerged in the past 7 years? So what are your thoughts on that?
Professor Lawrence, I think it is a necessary geopolitical question that I think everybody in India are concerned of. Have we lost the Chabahar port? But in my opinion, what we feel is that the geopolitical volatility is so intense that I think the last word is not yet known. My understanding is that a few years time, I think the volatility will stabilize, and more it will stabilize towards economic integration modes at the global level. More and more structures and such kind of things will happen through seaports, through variety of other modes. So the transitory phase, we possibly have lost few battles here and there. Iran is in difficult situation, and then naturally China is also but at the end of it, when you look at jobs to be created, economies to be sustained or developed, China has also 1.4 billion people. They have to create also that many jobs, that much of continuous economic prosperity growth, which is in a declining order. So at one point, my apprehension is that I think somewhere we have to stabilize and look at the ground economics, and that's where perhaps the scope of Chabahar can be revived.
Thank you, sir. I think while we let Dr. Pradhan take a breather, we have one question here from the audience, which is to Dr. Sakhoja and our former naval officers who are participating today. The question is, what important goals would the Indian Navy have in the near future in the maritime space? And how could or should engineers fit into these roles to benefit these goals and the plans for the near future? Dr. Sakhoja and Vice Admiral Muralidharan.
I guess as far as the Navy is concerned, I think we have Admiral Ashok Kumar to say something on it, but I will certainly pitch in here. Of course, I also take this opportunity to comment on what Professor Pradhan has shared with us. Let me begin by suggesting that probably its time has come, or it is opportune moment. We have to turn the Sagarmala upside down. It was conceptualized long ago. Your data suggests that it is lagging behind in projects. We probably have to turn it upside to read as smart ports.
Yes.
Across the board, there's a general understanding it is only smart ports which will survive.
Yes.
We are into a very big wave, Industry 4.0-led digitalization, artificial intelligence, big data, all these things are there and are being put to use. We have Qingdao port in China, which is using 5G, autonomous operations by cranes. So what we are talking about, Sagarmala, is something I would put it, we're talking about 1970s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And if you look at the context of the Indian Ocean, it's only Dubai or in Singapore, smart ports. And I think now that the Chinese have, the Sri Lankans have run out of steam as far as China is concerned, they would have been there in terms of 5G for their smart port. It's the smart ports which will survive. And let me, within that bracket, I'm just suggesting the growth rate. I have some very interesting figure, CAGR of 25%. So Sagarmala, if it doesn't start thinking about smart ports, I don't think it will be just a rhetoric of sorts. Closely associated with the smart ports, my belief is that we have to talk about green ports. The Clydebank Declaration, which has happened, COP26, on the sidelines of COP26, says only green lanes are the ones which are going to work. We are talking about a passage which is going to move from, say, Asia, particularly from China, all the way to Europe, and going to go through the Indian Ocean. It is going to be green lanes. And this green lane also features into our Quad. This was deliberated upon, this whole issue about transition to a green energy source. So the ports and also become part of this maritime ecosystem of ports, shipping, the whole lot of things. As a matter of fact, Sagar must be prefixed with sustainability. It shouldn't be read in blue ink. It should be read only in green ink. So the whole idea about us thinking about matters maritime will have to be thought from, not from blue. It will have to be green. That's where the whole world is now turning to. So Sagarmala must be turned upside down it's my belief. As far as the, Bay of Bengal, somebody asked about okay, before that, there is a question about how do engineers fit in. I think that is where we are heading in smart ports. That is where we needed IT skills. We have to retool, reskill for the purpose of managing this. The entire industry 4.0 is needed. It will be, of course, needed as far as the Navy is concerned, but I believe that we need Industry 4.0 for maritime economics. Whether it be part of, say, SDGs or it is part of our blue economy, that is where we have to fit in. And that's where this gene pool is needed over there. Other issue that you raised, Professor Pradhan, is about this so-called the customs union. We already have a concept called as sister ports. Again, between they run their own business, absolutely running. There are about 25 companies which are doing already this business. As a matter of sister port concept comes into even in the ASEAN. As far as Bay of Bengal is concerned, we are still stuck on short sea shipping. So for us, if we have to really look at the whole ecosystem, Sagarmala, Sagar, I think we need to I'm not saying reinvent Sagarmala, I think add something to it, which should be digital. And that's where BITS Pilani fits in. And that's where I'm talking about green part of it has to come in. These are the issues which will be very, very important for us to understand. And the entire issue is, these are the two drivers, smart and smart plus green. That is where it will be going in. You also made a reference to in terms of how to bring about all these agencies. I think we have this National Maritime Security advisor or a coordinator that is also being talked about. Probably that will come up, I think, under one umbrella. We'll get to hear. I'll stop at that. Thank you, Professor Pradhan. I think that answers the question, Purvaja, you had asked me to respond to. I think one of the admirals, Admiral Muralidharan, you could also respond to this question about, about in terms of the technology needed, the engineers, etc., etc.
Admiral, would you like to come in?
Yeah, actually, Admiral Ashok is here, who is more current on the topic, which we talked about, the National Maritime Security Advisor. So I'm sure he'll like to comment on it. But I fully agree with Dr. Sakhoja that the problem is that while we start so many projects like Sagar and many others, for variety of reasons, I'm not blaming any individuals or any groups. So for variety of reasons, we are not able to finish it in time. For example, I'll quote, since we are talking the maritime field, in the aspect of shipbuilding itself, while we start building ships, while we start putting things together, while the step is taken, sometimes the technology advances so much that we want to bring in so many things into it that we are not able to, get in time, it gets delayed. So that is what, delays some of these things. But it's time for us to upgrade and look at things differently. And Dr. Sakhoja very nicely put, especially the fourth IR technologies that should come into developed ports. As far as Indian Navy is concerned, I'm sure Admiral Ashok will talk about it. My own view is that, whatever you want to do, unless you have a maritime presence of your maritime forces in areas of interest to you, you will find that you get sidelined by other forces. They will keep threatening your, sea lanes of communications. There'll all be, indirect threats. That is where the Indian Navy and the Coast Guard and our other maritime assets come in. The very presence that you show in your areas, now it's actually straight to the entire Indo-Pacific. And as the foreign minister had said a couple of years ago in one of the things, that it's actually from the African coast all the way across the Pacific. So that is where now the Indian Navy is already deploying its force in all these places, showing our presence. So that is definitely going to help us to ensure that our points of view or interests are taken. Yes, but development of all ports or in our friendly countries, the others, we have been doing lots of help to them. We may not have the kind of wherewithal, the money to invest, like, you're talking about this big project that China is doing. But yes, we need to do it, and it'll be an incremental process. And I think, as Dr. Pradhan rightly brought out, one of the things that stands in our favor is that we are not a hegemonic power. So in the long run, we are going to make our presence felt. It may take us time. But on, so this is where I feel, but we need to be at it. It can't be given. One is use technology, use your presence. And as far as development of your skills are concerned, we will develop them. As it is, you find that there is a plethora of colleges teaching you engineering and other skills. But are we able to use all of them properly? Are we able to get the best out of those students? We are not. Until we can find a way of using all of them into these projects, we are going to be found wanting, because they will go to wherever they're getting better opportunities. I think I'll stop here, request Ashok to take on.
Admiral Ashok Kumar, are you, I think he has disconnected. I don't see him in the participant list. Maybe we'll bring him back when he logs back in. So just an announcement for all the
students may like to ask something if they want to say.
Yes, that's what I was saying, Dr. Pradhan. If anybody wants to ask any questions, please raise your hand and our technical team will unmute you and you can ask your question. And when Admiral Ashok Kumar comes back, we will
I think Admiral is back. Admiral is back.
He is? Yeah, that's right. Admiral, would you like to come in now, and then we'll open for questions after your comments are done? Admiral Ashok Kumar, are you? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Now I can.
Yes, sir. Please come in here.
Okay. I'll just take 2 minutes. You know, if you look at Sagar, the question specifically was, what are Indian Navy's future plans insofar as Sagar is concerned? If you actually look at Sagar, security and growth for all in the region, the very first word is security. So unless and until there is security, economic activity and growth cannot happen. Therein, is the important role that the Navy plays. The Navy actually transitioned into what is called the mission-based deployments on 1st of July 2017, by which, like Admiral Murli brought out, that ships are actually present in areas of our interest 24/7, 365 days a year. So whether it is Strait of Hormuz, through which 80% of our oil comes in, whether it is Gulf of Aden, where piracy, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Gulf of Aden, where Somali piracy is at its peak, it kind of ebbs and flows. Whether it is, gun running, arms smuggling, and so on and so forth. So it is the naval presence which actually addresses all this. Unless and until this is there, you know what happened in Mumbai when Ajmal Kasab and his gang came in and created a huge problem for us. So if there is no stability, economic activity cannot happen. Therein lies the importance of the Indian Navy. If we look to our east, our trade is galloping today, whether it is with ASEAN or with China. It's constantly on an increase. But yet, piracy is so prevalent in the Malacca Straits area, through which actually more than 85,000 ships per year pass through, originating from Indian Ocean region. So this is extremely critical that the Navy plays its role. Now, you asked me about the role of engineers. There are lots of things that are actually required from technology perspective. One is that we've got such a huge coastline, 7,000 odd kilometers of coastline. Yet our key length, the length of berth that the Navy, the country has, is just about 60 odd kilometers, I'm given to understand. So there is huge scope for development in that field, huge scope for ship repair, maintenance, because as it has been brought out, it is 130,000 ships per annum through the Indian Ocean region. So in case of a problem, where do they run to? Somebody spoke about transshipment and as to why Indian ports are not doing that well. This is also, I'm sure, being looked at in the sense that if your port charges are higher than, say, Colombo, they will obviously go to Colombo. So these are all being looked at by the government as well separately. But just the long and short of it, Unless and until there is security, there is no economic activity or prosperity, and that's where the Navy has a huge
role. Thank you so much, sir. I'd like to ask all the participants, if you have any questions, please raise your hands, and we will, call upon you to ask your question to all our scholars on the panel today.
Okay, can I just take 30 seconds to respond to that EU question the ambassador asked?
Sure, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay, hey, there again, while the FTA discussions with EU are on separately, let me again come back to the security issue. There is a whole lot of activity that is happening between the Indian Navy and the EU. The EU is, present in the Indian Ocean region, mainly through France, because France is actually a resident naval power in the Indian Ocean. They've got Reunion and a whole lot of bases around. So if you look at Crimario, which is the critical maritime routes of Indian Ocean, the Indian Naval Information Fusion Center, Indian Ocean region, and the Crimario are linked. The EU has got Op Atlanta running in Somalia, in the Gulf of Aden, and the Indian Navy is an active participant in Op Atlanta as well. The World Food Program, which is the UN thing, which is taken charge of by the EU, the Indian Navy is a full participant. So when it comes to European Union and the Indian Navy, there's a considerable amount of cooperation that happens in the Indian Ocean region.
Thank you so much, sir. I see no hands raised somehow, so I think all our speakers have explained everything so beautifully. So maybe we can.
I think was wanting to ask any question. So one of our students, I think he was wanting to, ask a question. He wants to join Indian Navy also.
All right. Suhas, do you have a question? I think I had asked one of your questions to Dr. Pradhan earlier.
Okay.
Hello. Yes, hello.
Yes, Suhas, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you, sirs, for answering the questions. I think it was quite a good insight. I don't have any additional questions as of now, but what Pradhan sir said is true, that I'm looking to join the Indian Navy, and I think with Sagarmala, it would be a great, I think engineers could play a great role, like you guys said. So,
Well,
right, I'm still looking for it.
Lovely to hear that, Suhas, and I'm sure we will have you on a panel with CPPR in a few years as well once you join the Navy. So we look forward to having you, I'm sure. So with that, I'd like to go to Dr. Sakhoja or Dr. Pradhan. Would you like to give any concluding remarks before I give the vote of thanks?
Yeah, hardly a concluding remark. I think we got deep insights into the entire gamut of things. I think when we talk about matters maritime, it also subsumes, to my understanding, matters naval also, because they're so very, you can't divorce one from the other. The commercial part of it, the security part of it, and we find that there was, of course, ambassador's question about EU. EU's got a sustainable blue economy strategy, and I have followed it very carefully. I find they are doing a fantastic job. It is adding, they're much more sophisticated, they're highly sophisticated in their approach for each sector that they put out a kind of way forward. And it's available on the web. Those of you, if you are interested, you can reach out to that particular portal and see for themselves. What we're going to see probably is that if we have to compete as far as the Indian Ocean is concerned, we will have to do a leapfrog. That is, we'll have to go about, digitalization of our ports. That is the remedy. Otherwise, Chabahar, yes, it is a good example, but we've been talking about Sabang for the last so many years now. That is a non-starter. So these are issues. I'm not suggesting that the government doesn't do. There are dynamics involved in it, which is not the purpose of this seminar. But my suggestion would be that if we can start re-looking into the Sagarmala once again and say where we bring in, or maybe do value addition, add-ons, etc. if we want to upend it in terms of making it more viable to be competing. Important is competing. As of now, I find only GNPT. Those of us who follow GNPT very carefully, we find some kind of let's say, a digitalization is there's a corridor which is running in terms of, as a matter of fact, Dr. Pradhan, you very briefly mentioned in terms of, even Thar Desert has got a ICD. Fine. But then, if we must not look at Sagarmala. Sagarmala is to be linked up with the Golden Quadrilateral. And that Golden Quadrilateral has to be linked up with the industrial centers. Now, this becomes a large maritime ecosystem. So port, to that matter, is not in the littorals. To my mind, port would run in Tughlaqabad outside Delhi, or it will go all the way to Indo-Nepal border. All right. And as a matter of fact, we got a new internal ICD coming up in Kashmir, in Srinagar, which has just been commissioned a few days ago. So you find that the shoreline has now moved, right, from the shores, literally, to the heartland. And that is where the supply chains are going to be. And we are going to look at green supply chains. We are going to look at hydrogen part stuff. We're going to look at LNG coming into all this. So all this will have to be part and parcel of this port infrastructure, in terms of receiving bunkering, a new way of looking at bunkering, So those are things to my mind, I think, but I don't know how it fits, all this fits into your schema in terms of your paper and your presentation. But then I thought that will be a useful idea if you put them at the back and say something, these are maybe a reference, and that could be maybe a kind of trigger for you to take on the next project. I'll stop at that. Thank you very much. It was a fascinating presentation, Professor Pradhan. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Half a minute, Purvaja, if I can.
Yes, sir, please come in.
One, particularly our young friends, engineers, those who have joined, I think Dr. Sakhoja talked about smart ports. The future is about smartness in everywhere. That will require big data, machine learning, and all that. I think engineers need to look at that direction, particularly. Either we become smart and more productive, or we cannot be productive at all. We are lost. So I think engineers must connect in that direction in a big way. And both IITs and ITs and all of that, I think lots of hopes are there. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pradhan. On that optimistic note, I'd like to thank Dr. Pradhan and Dr. Sakhoja for their insights on this very important topic. Also, a big thank you to Vice Admiral Muralidharan and Vice Admiral Ashok Kumar for your inputs and insights into the presentation that Dr. Pradhan gave. A big thank you to all of you for showing us the role and significance of the Sagar, Sagarmala, and the Seaports of India in the Indo-Pacific region, and the strategies that India has and needs to apply in this region. A thank you to all the participants for logging in and listening in so intently and for your questions. For more research and content from CPPR, please visit our website, www.cppr.in. With this, I'd like to formally close today's proceedings. Good evening and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Recording stopped.
Admiral Ashok Kumar.